Good morning, Nigeria. Happy Independence and welcome to our special Independence Day broadcast. Now, to start, today we embark on a journey through our nation's history. Today, we reflect on Nigeria's story from its conceptualization in 1914 to its birth in 1960 and its present and future. As you know, when you think of Nigeria's origins, it all begins with one pivotal figure, Herbert Macaulay, doesn't it?
Ah, yes, the guy with a finely crafted mustache. Who could forget that guy?
Most definitely, you can't. Now, born in 1864, Herbert Macaulay became the cornerstone of Nigerian nationalism. He championed the fight for self-governance long before others, standing as a beacon of resistance against colonial rule. His work laid the foundation for later nationalists like Nnamdi Chieku and Obafemi Awolowo, who would carry the torch further in the lead-up to independence.
Ah, yes, and speaking of Awolowo and Chieku, their contributions are monumental. Awolowo, a federalist and visionary leader, advocated for the creation of regional autonomy within Nigeria. He served as the premier of the Western region from 1954 to 1963, guiding the region to significant social and economic reforms. And Chieku, Nigeria's first president, born in 1904, was very instrumental in uniting various ethnic groups in the nationalist struggle.
Indeed. Now, Zik of Africa, as it was fondly called, became a symbol of Nigeria's unity and diversity. Now, by the time independence was declared on the 1st of October 1960, Tafawa Balewa, the first prime minister, alongside Azikiwe as governor general and later president, had the colossal task of steering a newborn nation. But just as the First Republic was finding its footing, political instability began to brew.
Exactly. Now, the First Republic saw its fair share of turbulence. By 1966, Nigeria had witnessed its first military coup, with Major General Johnson Aguiyi Ironsi taking over. His tenure was, however, very, very brief and marked by unrest, leading to his assassination later that year. This event then set Nigeria on a path of military rule that would dominate the country's leadership for the next 3 decades.
Now, the most defining event of this era, of course, was the Civil War, led by General Yakubu Gowon from 1967 to 1970. Nigeria was split, with Chukwuemeka Odumegwu Ojukwu leading the breakaway Republic of Biafra. Millions of lives were lost in the conflict, but Gowon's administration held Nigeria together, although the scars of the war remain even today.
Yeah, and it was a tumultuous period too. In the aftermath, Nigeria experienced a series of military takeovers. Murtala Mohammed came to power in 1975, but his life was cut short in a failed coup attempt in 1976. It was General Olusegun Obasanjo who then took over and remarkably handed over power to civilians in 1979. I don't think Blessings will remember this one. It ended the military first extended run, actually.
I cut the shade, Mazino, but now civilian rule was short-lived. The return of military leadership in 1983 brought General Muhammadu Buhari to power. Now, his administration was known for strict anti-corruption campaigns and austerity measures, but it was quickly replaced by Ibrahim Babangida in 1985. Babangida's controversial structural adjustment program aimed to reform the economy, but left many Nigerians disillusioned. And when his government gave a glimmer of hope, it was annulled. Freest and fairest election in the history of this great country, General Ibrahim Babangida annulled it and continued the disillusionment.
We can still hear the echoes of that one. Now, that disillusionment reached its peak during Sani Abacha's regime from 1993 to 1998. Oh, what a tough couple of years. Abacha's rule is remembered for widespread human rights abuse and economic mismanagement. Yet, after his sudden death, General Abdulsalami Abubakar stepped in and transitioned Nigeria back to civilian rule in 1999, making the start of the Fourth Republic.
Yes, and it was Olusegun Obasanjo, the same man who handed power over in 1979, who still returned as Nigeria's first president of the Fourth Republic. Now, his presidency saw democratic reforms and economic growth, but also controversies. Now, after him, Umaru Musa Yar'Adua took office in 2007, followed by Goodluck Jonathan, who became Nigeria's first Southern president.
Oh boy, now, that's a very interesting story, and we're not done yet with the stories because Jonathan's time in office was notable for economic reforms and Nigeria's brief status as, guess what, Africa's largest economy. However, his administration was marred by insecurity, leading to Muhammadu Buhari's return to power in 2015. This time through democratic elections. We all voted him in, didn't we? Buhari's second stint focused on anti-corruption campaigns, though his tenure also faced economic challenges as well.
Boy, what a journey it's been. But now, under Bola Tinubu's leadership, inaugurated in May 2023, Nigeria finds itself at a critical juncture, facing economic, social, and security challenges on an unprecedented scale. The removal of fuel subsidies, one of the most controversial decisions of his administration, sparked an immediate surge in fuel prices, and I mean immediate. The cost of petrol skyrocketed by over 300%, rippling through the economy and leading to widespread inflation. Now, as transportation costs surged, so did the prices of essential goods, of course, creating a heavy burden on the already struggling population. Commodities like food, electricity, and many other things that you can think of, the basic services that we are expecting in the country, have become unaffordable for many, driving millions deeper into poverty. This economic crisis has come on the heels of persistent security concerns, from Boko Haram insurgency in the northeast to banditry and kidnapping for ransom in the northwest and the southeast. Nigeria's citizens continue to live under the threat of violence. Communities have also been displaced. Children have been unable to attend schools, and entire regions have been paralyzed by insecurity. Now, the Tinubu administration has made some moves to address these concerns, no doubt, including efforts to strengthen the military and pursue negotiations with insurgents. But solutions remain elusive, as insecurity is deeply intertwined with economic deprivation.
And that's not all. Furthermore, protests and labor strikes have become commonplace. Labor unions, in response to the harsh economic conditions, have demanded wage increases, even as the government struggles to manage its revenue shortfalls. Now, the planned increase in minimum wage meant to provide some relief to workers. Well, it was delayed for a very long time, further eroding public trust. Now, Tinubu's government has promised economic reforms, but the tangible benefits of those reforms have yet to materialize for the average Nigerian. The hardships have also compounded dissatisfaction with other areas of governance. Healthcare systems already under strain have buckled as doctors and nurses flee the country for better opportunities abroad, leading to an acute shortage of medical professionals. Now, the education sector is another one. That one, too, in a disarray, with frequent university strikes disrupting the lives of millions of students. Now, as the Tinubu administration battles these crises, it faces mounting pressures from civil society groups, opposition parties, and an increasing restless population. People are asking when relief will come, when their living conditions will improve, and how long they must endure what feels like an unending struggle. Tinubu's promises of reviving the economy, strengthening the Naira, and improving security seems so far off, and a reality marred by hardships. Now, the hope of these tough economic decisions, very painful now, but will eventually bear fruit, is what he says. But for now, the future remains uncertain. Nigeria has always, stands at the crossroad, struggling to reconcile its enormous potential with the overwhelming challenges that continue to hinder its progress.
Well, we have just scratched the surface when it comes to discussing Nigeria. If you think we're done, we're nowhere near done. We're just starting. The story of this nation is far from over, and there's so much more to unpack. Its history, its future, and the path we're walking today. Stick with us as we dive deeper into this special broadcast, exploring Nigeria's triumphs, challenges, and potential. Welcome again, and stay with us as we continue to unravel the layers of this remarkable country on this important day of reflection and insight.
Welcome once again. Special Independence Day package here for you, broadcast rather here for you from News Central. My name is Mazino Appeal, and today, Nigeria's National Assembly, as a principal legislative institution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, has had a long history of institutional evolution, dating back to the colonial era. In this special report, News Central reflects on the trajectory of the parliament from independence till date. News Central's Emmanuel Bagudu reports.
What began as an instrument of British colonial administration to an institution that enjoys some measure of limited sovereignty. Reorganized in the 1960 Independence Constitution with Section 36 of the law saying, and I quote, "There shall be a Parliament of the Federation which shall consist of Her Majesty, a Senate, and a House of Representatives. Her Majesty was represented by the Governor General. Since then, the Nigerian legislative institutions blossomed and increased in number, size, and power as colonization withered away, ushering true federalism in 1963.
By the 1960 Constitution, we had a National Assembly comprising of the Senate, the House of Representatives, and incidentally also, as stated in the Constitution, the Queen of England, who was the head of state, as well, by the 1960 Constitution.
Prior to independence, there was a semblance of a legislature, that was headed by the first president of the Federation, the late Nnamdi Chieku.
The growth and development of the National Assembly is as a result of synergy between the civil society, the media, and the parliament, as well as consistent capacity building expected to strengthen all the legislative institutes and their affiliates.
This started as a policy outfit, policy organ of the National Assembly in 2006, actually. And then later it was made an institute standing on its own by an Act of Parliament of 2011, which has subsequently been amended. Now the institute is the think tank of the National Assembly. And if you understand what the think tank means, it means that all the technical works of the National Assembly are within our purview, and we have been able to deliver, name it, call it, policy advisory services rendered to the National Assembly, talking about, drafting bills. This year alone, we've drafted in hundreds bills that were drafted for the National Assembly.
And it may interest you to know that the Institute has since, a long time ago surpassed even this mandate. Like I was saying to you, we now train legislators across, Africa. We train West Africa. We've had the Ghanaian, several parliaments have come here, including the ECOWAS parliament. They have come here to understudy. We've provided training for them across a broad gamut of, a range of issues and aspects of parliamentary procedures.
At the moment, Nigeria's National Assembly can boast of decades of existence with milestone achievements since independence.
You will discover that we have had enormous legislative intervention coming by way of lawmaking since 1999. What do you want to talk about? Just name it. Every part of our country's life has been touched, by one law or the other made by the National Assembly. Are you talking of climate change, for instance? The National Assembly has intervened. Are you talking about proceeds of crime, anti-corruption, and so on and so forth? One of the earliest laws that the National Assembly made were two major laws, and they are still very effective even now. Talking of the ICPC Act and, of course, the EFCC Act. All these two acts are meant to, strengthen the fight against corruption. And that goes on to even the Electoral Act.
I think as an institution, the legislature has grown in leaps and bounds, no doubt. I think our legislators have grown more adept in the act of lawmaking, understanding the processes. And we have, whether Nigerians appreciate it or not, I know it's difficult to appreciate anything with the legislators and legislators. We have a fairly sophisticated, legislature.
If you look at generally in terms of laws, you could give them a little pass mark in terms of enactment of laws, but it is different. There's a different ball game enacting laws and also exercising the oversight over the implementation of those laws.
Despite these achievements, many believe there is still a lot of work needed to be done to get the parliament to live up to its responsibilities.
But I can tell you that for oversight, National Assembly has to struggle for the one major gap. It's not good, it's not fair for National Assembly to be depending on agencies that they have appropriated funds for to fund their oversight operations. And you know what that means?
People unjustly, I think, brand them as, all sorts of things. But they do that from a distance, not knowing exactly what these people grapple with on a daily basis. I still think more funds will avail the legislature, better performance. I think they should be more exposed to best practices. In other words, legislative exchange visits, are still required. Let them go to the more mature democracies and learn the art of lawmaking.
In terms of representation of the people, they have not been able to bring the views, the desires, the wishes and aspirations of the people up to the proper stage where it will be reflected in government policy, legislation, and the implementation of those policies and legislation. So in essence, if you look at the state of our democracy today, the failure of the legislature in being up to date in the discharge of their functions is to a great extent responsible for why we are where we are today.
It's 64 years of independence in Nigeria with a strong bicameral legislation. It is expected that more investment will be done in terms of innovations so as to continue to strengthen the nation's legislative institutions. Happy 64th Independence Anniversary, Nigeria. In Abuja, for News Central, I am Emmanuel Bagudu.
I want to say thank you to Emmanuel Bagudu there for bringing us that package. Very interesting, Nigeria at 64. And today here, our Independence Day broadcast. You want to stay tuned because we've got plenty coming your way with very exciting guests. Let's take a short break and we'll be back.
Welcome back, and once again, happy Independence Day, Nigeria. Now, before we went on the break, we had a very brilliantly presented report by Emmanuel Bagudu from Abuja on 64 years of Nigeria's governance. My name is Blessings Mosugu, and I'm your co-host for today. And today, we're taking a walk down memory lane, exploring the pivotal moments that have shaped our nation's journey since 1960. Now, from the euphoria of post-independence to the socio-economic challenges that we still face, we're examining Nigeria's past. Join us as we uncover the echoes of policies, economic reforms, and of course, governance shifts that define our present.
Yes, indeed. Let's dive into the structural adjustment program already of the 1980s under Ibrahim Babangida's military regime. I don't know if Blessings will remember this one, but this policy aimed to stabilize our economy through austerity measures and also privatization. But it left millions of Nigerians struggling with poverty and inflation. Fast forward to 1999, and the return to democracy under Olusegun Obasanjo promised reforms, stronger institutions, and also fight against corruption. Now, we're dealing with the aftermath of fuel subsidy removal in 2023, touted as an economic necessity, but exacerbating hardship for many Nigerians. I'm sure we can see the trend from 1980 up until now.
Now, very quickly, just to answer Mazino's questions, no, I don't remember any of that, and I'm catching myself. But yes, I do understand the hardships, and I do understand what the situation was before now and what it is at the present moment. Now, to help us make sense of Nigeria's journey so far, we're joined by Sam Kargbo, a seasoned political analyst and, of course, an author. And we're also joined by Nnamdi Chieku, author and spokesperson for the Africa Defense and Advancement Federation. And subsequently, we'll have Ambassador Auwal Musa, a national youth leader of New Nigeria People's Party, who would also be joining us to make sense of the journey so far. So thank you so much, Sam Kargbo, for joining us. And thank you also, Nnamdi, for being here. You both look amazing, and happy Independence Day.
Yes, indeed. Happy to you both.
Thank you so much.
Now,
happy Independence Day.
Gentlemen, let's begin by asking if you heard or saw the president's speech from today. And I'm going to ask if you guys can compare everything that he said to everything that Nigeria was from 1960 up until now. What are your thoughts? Let's start with you, Nnamdi, if you don't mind.
Hello. Thanks for having me on again. It's a pleasure to be on. It's interesting whenever we have these Independence Day speeches and we talk about Nigeria of yesteryear and Nigeria today and where Nigeria is going. And I can't but help but to suggest that Nigeria hasn't really moved as a society, as an economy, as a concept. And so despite the president's speech giving us some perspective in terms of where Nigeria has been, I'm 41 years old, and I've never known Nigeria to be anything other than what it is today. And I remember as a child that the complaints of our parents used to be the lack of healthcare institutions, the lack of education, the lack of roads. And then we are in a Nigeria today that we're complaining about the lack of food. And so we have seen a steady decline in terms of the socio-economic conditions of the country. And it's a tragedy. It's a tragedy for myself also, because I am somebody that believes wholeheartedly in the concept of Nigeria, in the union of Nigeria, and generally in terms of sub-Saharan Africa, but it hasn't delivered, and it hasn't delivered because I would proffer that the human capital that provides the engine for Nigeria has been compromised not only from independence, but since 200, 300 years ago. And we haven't recovered from that compromise. And when I mean compromise, I mean in terms of the education, system of education and system of indoctrination that creates the kinds of citizens and the kinds of leadership that we see in Nigeria that contributes to where it is today.
All right, thank you so much for that, Nnamdi. And it's a sad one that a lot of people do not even remember Nigeria being better than this. But if there's anything that we know is that the trajectory changed. We know that if anything, I mean, we're experiencing it worse off now. That's what a lot of people will tell you. And this will bring me to Sam. I want us to take a little bit of statistics, right? If we measure what it was, what Nigeria was as of when independence was declared, up until this day, we'll see that when it comes to the economy, we went from 46 million in population in 1960 to 240 million, and 150 million of these numbers are living in perpetual poverty. It goes on to say that our lending rate has, of course, gone from 7% to 17% from then till now. And believe it or not, petrol price as at some point, I don't remember, it went from 1 kobo to now over 86,000 Naira. So if we're looking at the trajectory of Nigeria's economy, how would we compare the economy as of 1960 to now? And what would we say are the causal factors that brought us to this deep end? Sam.
I'm 64, and I can tell you that I know of the time when the Naira was stronger than the dollar. I know of a time when Nigeria had 5 universities within the first 100 universities in the world. I know of a time when Nigeria was almost at par with Canada, Singapore, South Korea, and many of these other countries that have actually caught up with the Western world. So, yes, we had low numbers in terms of finances, but those low numbers were well managed, effectively utilized, and Nigeria was on a very, very good path until we had the misfortune of the military intervention. And this is where we have landed ourselves today. But let me tell you exactly what the problem is here. Just like you rightly said, from 46 million, now we have well over 200 million. Exponential increase in population that is not matched by production, that is not matched by infrastructural development, that is not matched by service delivery. And worse still, the aspirations of the fathers of independence, that is those who fought for Nigeria's independence, was to create a Nigerian. That was an aspiration at independence. And what does that mean? It meant that even though we had well over 500,000 ethnic nationalities, we could build up a Nigerian who would wake up and think about himself only as a Nigerian, and that his nationality would be secondary fallback mental succor. We've not been able to do that. Instead, what? Everybody is receding from the center to his own ethnic nationality, because he believes more in that than the aspirational Nigeria that was just what? Paper concept. What are the reasons? The leadership has been abysmally poor. The best of leadership that Nigeria has ever had was that we had at independence. So today, our problem starts with what? A corrupt leadership system, is an incompetent leadership system, and a governance system that is not working. I may not work as long as what? We have this set of mind of what? What is good for me is good for everybody. What is not good for me, it's not good for anybody. And that is the problem. So until we win ourselves from that mindset, hey, tomorrow is going to be worse.
Mr. Kargbo, I'm going to ask you to please regale us with a very interesting time in Nigeria's history, a time that myself and Nnamdi, just myself and Nnamdi would remember as a very interesting period in Nigeria's history. And this was under General Ibrahim Babangida, and this was during the time of the Structural Adjustment Program. This had policies that actually aimed at putting Nigeria back on track. There were such policies that involved cutbacks in public spending, a devaluation of the Naira, privatization of state-owned enterprises, and also liberalization of trade. What this caused was increased inflation, unemployment surge, worsening poverty, and also economic reliance on imports that grew, and policy protests and also widespread dissent. Now, in 2023, we had just one statement that kind of like trumped everything that Ibrahim Babangida did in the 80s. And I quote the now president, "Subsidy is gone." And that was it. If you were to compare the 80s and the suffering that Nigerians went through then, my parents would shudder when they think about the name Ibrahim Babangida. And it's the same way we shudder now when we think Bola Ahmed Tinubu when it comes to the sufferings and economic shortfalls that we have. How would you compare these two eras? Are we suffering more now, or was it even better during the time of Ibrahim Babangida and the Structural Adjustment Program?
It's about the same. The only thing you would say, you have more people suffering now because what? The population has increased. That structural, economic, whatever you call it, was a disaster. And this is where I have my problem between what? The economic mind and the social body and soul. Many of these people do not sit back to say, yes, these sort of policies that have been foisted on me by international institutions are meant to achieve what? Nigeria was a production company, so to speak. Nigeria was producing almost everything that it was what? It needed. But what did they do? And the state was what? On top of that, well-managed institutions, and there was that encouragement because what? The state production industries were competing very fairly with the private sector-led production factories. But what did these people say? They just woke up overnight and said, hey, let's change all of these and allow what? Economic forces. All of a sudden, you devalue the Naira to achieve what? When you are only exporting one thing. All of a sudden, the Naira that was what? Stronger than the dollar, you weaken it with the dream that when you do, you have what? You attract foreign investment. Oh no, that mistake is the one we are still reeling in. And worse still, this is what I see happening here. It is good to say, let's find ways and means of letting the government have more finances, with the belief that when the government has more finances, it would have more to use for the production of infrastructure and the other amenities that are useful for everybody. But when you have that money, what has been happening to it? It's so good to say, yes, If we remove fuel subsidy, government can earn so much. And the figures have been so high. What they've been sharing has almost tripled. But what has happened to the common man? Has that earning of the government reflecting in any way the life of the average man out there? No. And this is my problem. This is my fear. Let economists be advisors. Let them don't lead wheel of governance. When they do, all over the world, from the IMF to whatever institution, once you allow your country to be led by the evil economic forces and minds, you're going to land where you are, irrespective of your good intention. It will not succeed.
Okay, thank you, Sam, for that. I'm glad that you even mentioned, because that last point was a very salient point, and that's something that analysts and experts have been hammering on for the longest time, allowing the people who know about economy to actually lead on economic decision-making. But Nnamdi, let me come to you on that. Sam, you mentioned economic stability, or the lack of it, that we have in Nigeria, and you know, it feels like, as opposed to independence, as opposed to celebrating independence today, it feels like we're celebrating independence, because it's like we're going deeper into dependence. Looking at the economy of Nigeria, it's not really being very impressive. Now, we understand that if something is wrong, you start from somewhere to fix it. But it feels as though in Nigeria, we keep blaming it on the inherited baggages from the past administration. And that has gone on for years. We talk about the things that have not been done, and you know what we have inherited, the backlog of debt and work and economic reforms that should be done. So my question is, are we here today because of the mistakes that were made in the past, or the misdeeds that continue in the present leading to the future?
Yeah, I will say it's a little bit of both. I do want to provide a little bit of context and a little bit of grace when we evaluate developing countries like Nigeria. 64 years is not a long time in the grand scheme of things in order for a country to find its identity, to find its economic footing. But the problem for Nigeria, most sub-Saharan African countries, is that we're in a very fast-moving world. And so therefore, you don't have that time that other countries had in order to find your economic identity, your political identity, and so on. So I do want to give a little bit of grace and say that given the short history of Nigeria as a country, as a construct, that what we are going through in terms of finding our way is kind of normal. But then I want to make two very important points when we talk about why we are where we are today. The basis of every civilization comes down to the education and the indoctrination of the people. It is very telling that about 7 years after independence, Nigeria was already at war with itself. What does that tell you? It tells you that the human capital that drives the country, that drives the economy, that drives the society was already compromised from the beginning. Compromised by what? Compromised by the scourges of fear, of inferiority complex, right? And of capitalism and consumerism. These scourges came from what? They came from imperialism, colonization, and go back as far as the slave trade. And we never recovered from that. We never recovered, so when we talk about Nigeria, it's not just something that started in the 1960s. We have to talk about 200, 300 years of human capital that was miseducated, misindoctrinated, flown all over the world, and completely deconstructed. We were deconstructed from our African identity, from social, political, and economic models that actually worked for us and had foreign models foisted upon us. And this isn't a case of trying to blame colonialism, etc., but it's a fact. It's a fact because you can't build a country with compromised human capital. So that's number one. The second issue that we have is that very soon after independence, the system of governance or the economic system in Nigeria really didn't go to capitalism or democracy, etc. I would call it a turn-by-turn system. That is the system that we've had in Nigeria since the British supposedly left Nigeria. And what does the turn-by-turn system mean? The turn-by-turn system means that if I find a way by any means necessary, by various forms of machinations to get into power. I will do as I want and as I please, and I'll take as much as I want and as I please. And that has always been the system. And if you look at Nigeria from independence through the military coups, through the so-called democratic construct that we have today, it's always been a turn-by-turn system. And the problem with the turn-by-turn system is it's a vicious cycle. Because if you look at it this way, PDP held sway in Nigeria for about 16 years, right? And then APC and the acolytes of the APC were on the sidelines, fighting so-called the good fight for democracy, for military control, from the corruption of PDP and so on. And then now that these same APC have come into place, the same characters that seemed like they were heroes in yesteryear have now become the tormentors of Nigeria today. Why? Because it's their turn. And when it's my turn, I will chop and I will act with impunity and do as I please. And so these are the two scourges that continue to perpetuate the cycle or the downward decline of Nigeria, which is that we have a compromised human capital, right? And then we have a system that is not very sophisticated in terms of governance and economic development. It's really a turn-by-turn system, right? Now, the question becomes, how do we allay these two scourges that we found ourselves in? And I can tell Nigerians that it's going to be a painful process. It's not going to be easy. This economic death spiral that we're in is only going to get worse. And it's going to get worse because the geopolitical environment is becoming much more harsher in terms of what's happening with climate change, in terms of what's happening with technological advancement and automation. And so we have effectively run out of time. We no longer have time to figure it out. And my dates that I always give in terms of this discussion is 2030, that if we don't restructure Nigeria by 2030, and by extension, if we don't restructure sub-Saharan Africa by 2030, I shudder to see what is going to happen to us by mid-century and by the end of this century, and by the end of the 21st century as well.
Nnamdi, that reminds me of a book I read called Africa on a Precipice. Oh, I can't remember the author. Oh, it was you.
Yes.
In any case, did you just say 64 years is not a long time? Have you met Mr. Sam Kargbo? Because he's exactly 64, and he'll tell you that that's a very long time for plenty of things to happen. But then again, let's take a look at these different eras and how they've affected Nigeria in the long run. We had a situation where initially we had independence, and then after 9 years, we went into a situation where it was a military coup, and then we had military rule for about 19 years, if I'm not mistaken. And then after we got back to democracy, we still had this situation where we had democratic dispensation being led by military or former military heads. So how has this affected Nigeria in the long run? Were we held back by these errors that shouldn't have been, or were they necessary in bringing us where we are currently? Nnamdi, please.
Yeah, well, first of all, I would disagree with the differentiation between the so-called democratic era and the military era and so on. It's the same characters. It's the same system. There is no such thing as in my opinion, as a democratic era in Nigeria or a military era, because each of these so-called eras have been characterized by the impunity of the main actors in each of these areas. So whether it's businessmen or military men, etc., men and women to be exact, the result has still been the same. The results have still been the same because for 64 years, we have actually produced leaders without ambition. You know, out of all the scourges or all the deficiencies of leadership, lack of ambition is probably the worst, right? And the question becomes, why is it that we have continuously produced leaders without ambition? And why do I say we produce leaders without ambition? Leaders with ambitions do simple things like build roads, build hospitals. They have an imagination that they want to be powerful, not just on a regional level, not just on a continental level, but on a global level. And we've never had a Nigerian leader, and for the most part, African leaders who have sought to be relevant at a geopolitical level, at a global level. And the question is why? It comes back to the initial point that I made, that the human capital has already been compromised.
Okay.
That, yes.
Apologies, Nnamdi, but we definitely have to go now. That's the much we can take for this segment. But I want to say a big thank you and just put out there that, you know, you mentioned 2030. 2030 used to seem like a long time to come.
6 years away.
But I mean, it's very close now. But very quickly, I just want to say thank you so much, Sam Kargbo, seasoned political analyst and author, and Nigeria's age mate. So if you're wondering what 64 years looks like, I mean, that's our man right there. Thank you so much. And of course, Nnamdi Chieku, author and spokesperson for the Africa Defense and Advancement Federation. It was really an insightful conversation. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
It's our pleasure. All right, very quickly, we go on a short break and we'll come back to the live broadcast, of course, Independence Day celebration. We're not going anywhere, so don't as well. Stay with us.
Nigeria is a good country, but we have hope that the country will be okay. No matter how long it will take us, Nigeria have a bright future. But I believe that the problem of Nigeria is just leadership and the devil. The devil covered the eyes of our leaders. I was in Dubai. I am interacting with a friend from Brazil. The guy said that their country too, they have passed through the kind of problem we are passing through, and they are still passing through the problem. But anytime they requested for a change, they only get a change. But yeah, anytime we request for a change, we don't get a change.
The only thing I can recall is that we have had failed leadership all along, from beginning to this time.
The child been spending 10 years in the school. Before you know it, they will say they strike. Before you will know it, one thing will come on the other. The child is supposed to train on time and begin to help you to train the younger one. Delay. I don't even, if to say I can change, I will change. I blame myself to become Nigeria. I don't even see anything that is good in Nigeria as at present now.
You know what it takes to be, you say you want to celebrate your birthday. A day before that day, you don't already go crazy out of joy. Not that you understand me, not being stupid, but the joy of say you are going to witness another birthday tomorrow. Only that joy alone. Eh? But look at me now. Now corn I go chop. Me where they go Mr. B's like no more, as if they are kitchen to parlor and bedroom. Now corn I chop. Is it supposed to be like that? They say change and hope. The change, is it coming up? No. Rather, it's becoming worse than before.